Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 25th of March 2025. My name's Councillor John Isaac. I'm the chairman of the committee, and I've got some eminent borough councillors sitting with us tonight on the committee. We'll go through the usual preambles. If the fire alarm sounds, it's advisable to leave the room and gather in the War Memorial Park. The meeting is being webcast, so greetings to all. Anyone out there who's watching us on the webcast on YouTube. Microphones, please, in order to be heard properly and recorded, could you please speak, get close enough to your microphones, and could you put your mobile phones on silent or switch them off? Thank you. Right. Looking at the agenda for the committee tonight, first of all, we need to hear if there have been any apologies for absence or substitution. So I'm going to turn to Ellie on that.
There's no apologies that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Any member of the committee got any declarations of interest they wish to declare? No. Okay, thank you. We last met on the 21st of January, and we have the minutes before us. Are we happy that they represent an accurate record of the meeting? Good. Okay. Just to record that there were some follow-up questions from the last meeting, and Democratic Services got the answers, I think, for those and circulated them on the 7th of February. So I hope everyone's happy with the answers that we got to the questions raised at that particular meeting. Now, moving on to the main agenda. This evening, we're looking at the Future Economy Framework, the Q3 Performance Indicator Reviews, and the proposed amendments to the key performance indicators for 25-26. I think it would be as well if we adjusted the running order and started this evening with the Q3 KPIs and the proposed amendments, because it's very important that we get through all those quarterly measurements, and we've had the experience in the past of not being able to get through all those in one meeting, and I'm sure we don't want to repeat that again. And secondly, on that, we've got the usual list of key performance indicators, but I hope that the committee will be content that what we've, in terms of addressing officers, senior officers addressing the KPIs, what we've got here are the officers responsible for the amber and the red KPIs. That doesn't prevent us in any way from raising any questions in regard to all the KPIs that have been met, and indeed offering praise to those who have exceeded their KPIs, if we so wish. So if we're content with that, I'm going to then ask the leader of the council, Councillor Harvey, to introduce the Q3 report. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you to members for your time this evening to review the document that's in front of you. And I'm sure you've got questions that our team of officers this evening will be happy to answer. It does show a very good picture if you look at the proposed, where am I on the following page, of 46 measures that we had before us this evening, 19 are exceeded, 20 are on track, only 6 are in amber and 1 is in red. And so the officer team, obviously doing the work behind the scenes, they all are on all of our projects, and all of the council plan are, I think, doing a really incredible job. But we welcome the questions and we welcome the transparency of this evening as an opportunity to have a conversation with you. So, John, I'm very happy to take, questions, and the officer team are too, and welcome the scrutiny. It's what we're here for. And thank you.
Good, thank you. And if I could turn to the director, Katie Salis, to provide some background to the KPIs, and then we can open it up for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. So as the leader mentioned, there are 46 measures reporting in this Q3 paper, and that compares to 39 measures in Q2. And this is because the measures relating to the biannual residence survey are included in the pack that's before you. Whilst we consider the performance where the measures have not been met shortly with the relevant heads of service, I thought it would be a good idea to draw committee's attention, with agreement of Councillor Isaac, to the following measures where the target has been exceeded. So KPI 109, where we measure the minimum number of advertising cycles for social housing lets available per annum, the housing team have delivered 38 as of Q3 against an annual target of 45. Also worth drawing your attention in the housing service, where we seek to achieve a minimum of 80% of homeless approaches being resolved and bed and breakfast prevented. The team have consistently exceeded that target across all 3 quarters, with 97% achieved in Q3. For KPI 2.15, where we're seeking to increase the number of zero and low emission taxis and private hire vehicles licensed in the borough, a target of 7 or more has been exceeded with 17 vehicles. Corporate complaints in Q3 have all been responded to within our 10 working day target. The economy, culture and place marketing team have exceeded on 4 of their measures, while the other 2 measures are on track and green. Q3 demonstrates 100% determining of completed applications for disabled facilities grants in the Environment and Community Service Business Unit. And financial services have also delivered beyond target results for the Treasury Management portfolio, debt collection rates for sundry and property, and in Q3 took 4 calendar days on average to process change of circumstances for housing benefit claims. There has also been a sharp increase in performance between Q2 and Q3 on the average processing time of new housing benefit claims, which now stands beyond the target of 15 calendar days at 12 calendar days, and has moved to this position from Q2, where it was stood at 19 days. Similarly, non-major planning applications determined within the statutory timeline has shown significant improvement from amber in Q1 and Q2 to blue exceeding target in Q3, where the team achieved 90% against a target of 85% or more. So I'll now hand back to the Chair so that the amber and red measures can be considered in further detail.
Thank you. Before we invite the first officer up, any comments about what you heard there from Katie? Nope. Okay. So in the running order, the first amber relates to the percentage of residents feeling safe outside their local area after dark, which is a biannual survey. The target is 75%, and that's narrowly missed at 73%. So Tom, could you come up, please? Tom Payne, yeah. So this is the only amber as far as you're concerned, isn't it, I think? Oh, is it? Right, okay. So shall we do both then? Because rather than having you going backwards and forwards. So if you'd like to speak to both of them, that would be excellent.
So good evening, councillors. So both of the measures in my service area relate to the results from the residents' survey that was undertaken late 2024. So the first one refers to, obviously we talked about the percentage of residents that feel safe at night. Clearly very important that we understand how safe our residents feel when they go out and about. This is a measure that is looked at in lots of different local authorities, so it's one we benchmark. It's one of the sort of suite of local government association sort of key indicators. It also flows from our community safety partnership as one of the key priorities for our community safety partnership across Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore. Again, a key priority and a key measure for us in terms of how effective are the agencies in addressing antisocial behaviour and giving residents that feeling of confidence about how they feel when they go out at night. Obviously, it's slightly disappointing that the result has come down from the previous resident survey, which was 75%. It's dropped a couple of percentage points to 73%. I'm not sensing that's a hugely significant drop in the scheme of things. I think what we saw across the board with a lot of the resident survey results was that they kind of, on average, there was a sort of slight downward by 1 or 2% on a lot of the indicators. So there was that, which was, and I think that was represented across different areas as well. There just seemed to be a similar sort of trend across different local authorities who were undertaking similar surveys. Also saw a similar sort of drop in terms of satisfaction. So again, not necessarily sensing it's specifically a Basingstoke issue. It could have just simply been the way that people were feeling when they filled in surveys last year. Obviously, we've done a lot in the last year to try and improve their feeling of safety in the town centre. The Safer Streets 5 programme, which is basically looking to introduce a lot more cameras, CCTV cameras, particularly around the town centre, into areas where we've got or we've seen sort of higher reports of antisocial behaviour. That's a project that is still ongoing, but we've installed quite a number of additional cameras around the town centre. We've also carried out a lot of what I call sort of gardening work, if you like, addressing areas where there's a feeling of less safety because the shrubs have grown up, etc., quite high. The station is perhaps a good example of that, where we've done a lot of intensive work there to, again, improve sight lines, visibility, and improve that feeling of safety for people. So there's a variety of actions that we take. We obviously listen to the CSPOs, who get that feedback from residents in terms of what their concerns are, and then feed that back to our grounds maintenance team so we can look to take action to sort of address those sorts of issues in that way. But happy to take any questions you've got specifically on this one.
Thanks, Tom. It's very encouraging. So, yes, Councillor Jones.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, it's just nice to hear about the cameras. Are you doing all of the car parks in which we own? Because I will plead, a couple of years ago I lost my cat on my car, which was parked there, and it's the only, no cameras, but and apparently they weren't common in that car park, but it was common that they were nicking the converters because of the metals or whatever. And I just wondered how that was Vine Road. But yeah, I'm not complaining, that was done a couple of years ago, but I just wondered whether we could look at that, make sure our car parks are all covered at some stage.
Yeah, a lot of the car parks are covered by CCTV. I can come back and confirm, perhaps in writing, which ones are. We've got 23 car parks, so yeah, I can't be specific about which ones definitely are and which ones definitely aren't, but I can certainly come back to you afterwards with an update.
Just the principle of cameras, not that particular car park, it didn't have it, but perhaps it wasn't as bad as somewhere else is more needed. That's all.
Thank you, Tony. Kate, you got a question.
Thank you. It's just I can see we do this twice a year, but is there a seasonal variation? So as there's more nighttime, do we get more problems with being out after dark? I mean, compared year on year, does it?
So it's not done twice a year. It's done once every 2 years as part of the resident survey. So yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't comment on whether there is a trend. I mean, it tends to be done in the winter months, which is again when people will potentially feel a little bit more unsafe, if you like, because it's darker at night. Maybe that does influence the result.
Yes, it's an interesting word, biennial, isn't it, really? But it's entirely. I think, Jonathan, you've got a question.
Yep. I recently went for a ride along with our local constabulary, and I know the residents of Chinham feel the same way as I do about electric bicycles, which have become a scourge for criminal activity in Basingstoke. Can you tell us how, if you have any measures to address this coming up, please?
So yeah, I'm aware that has been relayed back to me in terms of your experience when you're out on patrol. I think with the police. So yeah, it's a common issue, isn't it? A common frustration and concern. I think a lot of residents have when scooters, particularly, travelling quite quickly. The police have attended the Resident Services Committee in the past, and where they've talked specifically about the sort of types, their approach to trying to tackle that type of activity. Certainly our CSPO teams do challenge that behaviour and individuals where they come across them in the course of their patrols, and certainly when reports come through to the team about particular individuals, we do follow that up. So you know, it is largely a policing issue, and it is really incredibly difficult, as I'm sure you know, to try and stop people when they're out and about on these scooters or electric bikes, because they happen to be very quick and very easy to sort of navigate away.
Do you think it would be worth looking into the idea of pop-up CCTV, kind of mobile CCTV cameras that can be moved around to try and head off some of the kind of more pervasive offenders in this area? So places like if someone knows there's a CCTV camera there, they're not going to go there to commit crime, obviously. However, if you have a situation where you turn up to somewhere where you don't expect there to be CCTV and there is, it might then put you off committing a crime in that area. And the officers certainly spoke about this being deployed in Surrey. I don't know if it's something we can look into in Basingstoke.
So at the moment, that sort of intelligence about particular problem areas or hotspots, issues, you know, we respond to that collectively with our partners in the police. So we will look at what's the best intervention to take. So that usually will involve patrols with our CSPO team or working in collaboration with the police to target those areas with more intensive patrols. I think the challenge, as you'd appreciate with the cameras, you could put it in one location, it might cover one small area and then just displace it slightly down the road. So I'm not saying I'm dismiss that as a concept, but I think patrols is a good way to go, because then you can engage with the residents and the community to understand what the issues are and the patterns of behaviour, and you can try and tackle it more intelligently than just putting a camera there. The challenge with the camera also is you've got to identify the people, which is always difficult through CCTV, or can be difficult.
Right, Julian?
Yeah, just in terms of people's perception, I'm not sure quite how long the survey lasts, but is there any measure or any consideration of the reports in local media that might change people's perception?
I think yes, probably is my instinct is probably yes. People's perception and feeling of safety is going to be probably affected by what they see in the national news, and if there happened to have been a serious incident somewhere in the country that week, people naturally are going to feel a little bit more apprehensive. So I think you're right. There are those sorts of dynamics that are going to affect how people feel, and it may not reflect on their local area at all. So it's a very difficult one. I think the best we can do is say we are tracking this year on year, so we can understand what the trends are. This hasn't gone down dramatically, which is reassuring. So yeah, but I think you're right. There's probably all kinds of factors that influence how people feel.
Tony?
Yeah, do you actually break it down into wards at all, this survey? Or because
Katie might know better than me whether we can. I don't.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, Tony. I think it can be done. The actual overall survey is statistically relevant. The issue of breaking it into wards is it may then not be as statistically relevant. It's that breakdown of the overall So how useful are the figures? Because the overall is done in a way that's scientifically proven. I mean, those that do stats are far better at it than I can describe, but that's the point, I think. But it can be, there's a general view you might be able to get ward by ward, but it wouldn't be statistically accurate, I don't think.
Yeah, I know at one time the police used to break it down into their wards, which they do. We still get those, Paul? Because I think that would be very useful to see where the crimes are committed, and then we can say to officers we want them to look into that area. I expect they already do, but we don't know that, do we, as councillors, I'm afraid.
The police's data set is much stronger, specifically ward by ward, area by area. They have a much stronger, in terms of the specific crimes, specific related data that they hold in that. This relates to the national LGA figures, the national surveys, and so on. Their data is a very different data set, but yes, it does break it down ward by ward and gives you a much more deep picture.
When we talk about, sorry, Chairman, just one little bit. When we talk about people on electric bikes and that, I don't know whether our staff are using bikes these days, but if they are, why don't we give them electric bikes to go after them? Because when I was standing next to a policeman, he said, "Oh, I can't catch them. We know who it is, but I can't catch them." It'd be an idea, perhaps we, have electric bikes for our own people to chase these.
Many years ago, Tony, if you remember when we had the same issue with on bikes before electric bikes were a thing, the police did actually go out on bikes, and the old nickname used to be around the estate, "Feds on Peds," and it was that notion of actually they were very good at dealing with the crime. It was a means of dealing with it on estates and another means, but electric bikes, that's a matter for the police. That's a matter for them to decide how they go about their business.
Okay, so moving on then, are we concluded that particular KPI? So we can detain you for one more KPI, which is amber, i.e. it's not red or green, Tom, and that's resident satisfaction with parks and open spaces. Again, one of your biannual surveys. And the target is 85%, and you narrowly missed it at 82%. So again, if there's anything you'd like to add to that, that would be great.
Again, so it's the same sort of context as I've mentioned for the other survey, in the sense of what we've seen in terms of that reduction, very slight reduction in the satisfaction overall. I think last year was positive in the context that we went from 2 to 3 Green Flag Award winning parks in the borough. So Eastrock Park, War Memorial Park, and then Beggarwood Park was the newest one, which again reflects positively on all the positive work that goes on in the park and the standards that we achieve in that park, and the feedback from people who use the park. Again, a really positive signal that we're maintaining a very good standard in that area. We're obviously continuing to invest heavily into play areas, and I think 4 play areas were completed last financial year, and 5 are underway as we speak. So again, that significant investment in play areas to improve those facilities to residents using our parks is ongoing. So yeah, they're the sort of key updates from me. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions from any member of the committee? Councillor Golding.
Thank you. I appreciate that it's probably just you don't get any qualitative data from the survey, do you? But do we have kind of from customer comments and complaints and things, any indication of why satisfaction might be going down? Like I know in my area last year we had a lot of issue with grass being too long in the play parks and mowers not getting through gates and stuff like that. I don't know whether have we got any kind of themes that are drawn out through other methods?
That's a really good point, isn't it, in terms of just that trend data around service requests or complaints, as you might see it. So trends are generally very positive. I think we are improving. We did a briefing not that long ago in terms of our parks and street scene, talking about grounds maintenance, street cleansing, and all the improvements that we've made to the service, particularly in the last few years. So my sense of it is we continue to get a high number of compliments actually about the work that the teams deliver and the standards that we provide and facilities that are available to residents. So I think we still see that. Compared to any other service that I look after, grounds and streets, I just get lots and lots of compliments about. It's not to say that we don't get complaints as well, but actually we get a high number of compliments about the standards that we achieve. We do track service requests, but again, I've got no particular reason to believe there's anything in that data that would tell me why the figures have gone down slightly.
Anyone else got anything they want to ask Tom? Sorry, was that somebody there? Julian, is it?
No, sorry, I was pointing.
Hannah, right. Thank
Sorry, I just looked around the room and realised I was probably the person that spends by far the most amount of time in play parks at the moment, and they really are good. And they're often very popular. And I think I'm planning on going to the Lime Pits this week, and the work that's been done there is really excellent. So the team should be supported with that and commended, I think.
Good to hear. Right, Councillor Jones.
How often do we inspect the parks ourselves, you know, for glass and things like that? Is it a daily thing or what?
So, okay, so in terms of safety inspections, or you mean just
We all know we get used on at night, and usually broken bottles and different things at different times.
So we're doing safety inspections at least once a week, formal inspection once a week. But on top of that, obviously, as you say, there'll be well, yeah, exactly. Glass would be a priority. Any kind of drug paraphernalia, again, priority. So, we respond to those sorts of things during daytime, but also if there was that sort of hazardous material in a play park that is reported, we can respond to that out of hours as well, which was again a bit of a service enhancement. We do have an out of hours reactive team that would respond to those sorts of issues out of hours. So again, we'd respond to that really, really quickly if it's reported. We do clearly have street cleansing staff that are routinely walking the streets and emptying litter bins, etc. So again, they will be keeping an eye on whether or not there's glass or other sort of rubbish in the play areas that needs to be cleared away.
Right. Okay. I think that's grateful to you for your contribution, Tom. Do hang around because I think there might be some questions on the next agenda item. So we now move on to the household waste recycling rate. The target is 32%, and its Q2 result was 30.8%, down from the Q1 result, which was on target. So we've got the service lead, Helen Taylor-Cobb, with us tonight. Helen, can you illuminate?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. So the decline that we've seen in that overall number is seasonally the norm. So I think the last time that I came to see you, I spoke about Q1 and I said that was the spring season. That's when we see the highest volume of garden waste in the bins, and garden waste is the predominant effector of the overall score here. So in Q2, that number decreases over the summer months, particularly if we've had hot weather or rainy weather, because that impacts whether or not people are cutting their grass or things are growing quite as readily as they would. That number will decrease again in Q3 and again in Q4, which is our lowest rate in the garden waste bins. We've checked the seasonal variation for you for Q2 across the previous years, and we've seen exactly the same seasonal variations there. So there is nothing unusual in this figure compared to previous years. Just to give you an indication, the Q2 24-25 saw a 25% reduction in garden waste tonnage, but just to reassure you that does not reflect the garden waste subscriber numbers that are continuing to grow, which would say that the service is recognised and popular and being well used. The Q1, Q2 garden waste figures equated to 12.29 and 9.68 respectively towards the overall recycling rate, and therefore the garden waste tonnage drop that we saw in Q2 reduced the overall recycling rate down by 2.61% just by itself. So that accounts for the variation. The good news is that overall in the waste service we have seen an overall kilogram per household waste drop, which means that people are reusing more and reducing their waste volumes overall, which is a really good news in terms of our climate change statements, and therefore there are no officer concerns with the numbers that are here before you.
Thank you very much. Right, any questions for Helen? Councillor Golding.
Sorry to be difficult, but if you're expecting that the quarter two, like all the subsequent quarters for the year, to be lower, then we're going to miss our target quite dramatically. Yeah. Presumably we missed it last year as well. Is there anything we're doing to try and meet it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I'd like to do is just spend some time with the team when we've got a bit of spare time, just to look at whether or not we need to seasonally vary the quarterly numbers, because that would mean that the KPIs would actually reflect the tonnage that we would expect to see within the quarter. In the winter, we're not expecting to see the recycling rate volumes the same. So I think there's just no variation at the moment. It's sort of an average across the year.
If I could come back. So, I mean, that would, presumably we chose 32 for a reason, which should have been stretching. But if we're going to meet 32, whether you vary it throughout like 32, you should be hitting like 36 in quarter one to then average out on 32. And we're not even close to that. I've looked at these for too many years, but I think like 32 is like a national benchmarky type goal, isn't it? So we shouldn't be lowering our standards. We should be trying to increase our recycling rate.
Yeah, so the increase of the recycling rate should be our primary driver. Well, our primary driver should be reduce waste. Our secondary driver should be reuse. Our third driver should be recycle. I think the challenge that we have at the moment is obviously we still have a weekly waste collection, and therefore that does impact the recycling rates that we have compared to the national average. That being said, we are seeing an increase in recycling, and I think I'd like to look at the Q3 figures when I come back to committee, because we think what we are starting to see is a trend in the reduction of recycling as a result of the changes that have been made through the Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme. So this is the scheme under the simpler recycling process that's being adopted. So what we are seeing now is a change of materials in the waste streams that producers are using for packaging, and that in and of itself is lowering the rate of volume on our recycling, but also in our household waste. So we're hoping that that will be a positive benefit moving forward.
Councillor Jones.
Is what you're really saying, is there something else we should be recycling? Because a lot of this recycling is all done on weight, not on volume, it's on weight. So are we missing out? We should be recycling, I don't know. We recycle glass now, that comes into it, I assume. That's quite heavy, and obviously the green waste, that boosted us. And it made us, made some of these so-called brilliant people, brilliant boroughs, I might say, look better than what they were because they were already doing it. But is there something else we could recycle in general terms? And I'll make it clear, I don't follow your brief about the going weekly and everything. I think it's a nonsense. It's just an excuse, not yours. They all use it, so I'm not having to go at you on that one, but I do find it a bit of a nonsense. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I think there is something that we can be doing, and I think we've got a really good opportunity coming up. So Hampshire County Council at the moment are looking at the configuration of their waste infrastructure, which needs to be renewed. It's now reaching its end of life. As part of that process, they are looking to develop a new mechanical or materials recovery facility, which is called a MRF. As part of that, one of the things that they will be introducing is all of the items that the government would like put through the recycling stream. And importantly, that will include the pots, tubs and trays. And for many of our residents, it's the plastics that frustrate them in terms of their recycling. So that will provide a really good opportunity for getting more out of our black bin and into the recycling bin. As a borough, we still don't recycle everything that we could. So we do have regular messaging that goes out through our residents' newsletters, on our social media. We have signs on the side of the vehicles, just trying to re-emphasise all of the materials that can currently be recycled. And if we got those out of the black bin, that would be marvellous.
Just say that, you know, you go to different boroughs and different places during, and they're recycling a lot of different stuff to us, and not particularly around this area in Hampshire, but you know, you go up to Leeds, up that way, they've always done a lot more than what we have. And I'll be honest, I don't get it that we don't do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so a lot of that is literally down to the disposal infrastructure that each respective county has. And I think that's why the government, consecutive governments, have proposed a simpler recycling scheme, because that means that it will standardise the products so we can recycle up and down the length and breadth of the country.
Julian, yeah.
You appear to give quite a lot of weight to reuse. I'm not absolutely sure what's included in that and what we could do to increase the amount.
Yeah, thank you. So we have some information on our web pages that we try to share with residents when they phone up, for example, to book a bulky waste collection. So at the moment with things like Facebook, you have local selling sites or freebie adverts. So the idea is, for example, if you've got, I don't know, a child's play thing, that you put it onto FaceBay or Facebook and you try and get somebody who might want it for free or for a small charge. The other thing that we do is we work closely with the Community Furniture Project. If we have white goods to collect and just white goods, Community Furniture Project are our chosen partner and they will go and get those. The benefit of that, of course, is that they then refurbish and resell those, which means that it puts it into reuse rather than being thrown away. So it's an important part of the reuse programme.
Julian, yeah.
Yes, I think my own experience, and I've noticed the experience of others, is in reuse of furniture. Almost invariably they say it doesn't contain the right mark and therefore it's not acceptable. Is there any way we can improve that?
Yeah, so that is to do with something called POPs, which is persistent organic pollutants, and fire retardant is one of those things. So the challenge that we have with furniture is that if that furniture is damaged in any way, it has to be disposed of through a separate stream to contain those pollutants from escape. So we have a separate stream for products that might be damaged. Clearly, if it's furniture that can be reused, then those social media sites are a good way of getting rid of fabric furniture, because there are quite tight controls around what we as a collection authority can do with that material.
Right, okay, thank you. Hannah, like one last question perhaps? Or
Can I ask why we don't have any Tetra Pak recycling banks? Because they do in Ferrum and Gosport, so it can't be a Hampshire thing. But I have quite a few, more than one resident that drives from Oakley to Newbury to recycle their Tetra Paks, sometimes taking half the village, it feels like. But that does feel really inefficient.
Yeah, so the Tetra Paks have always been, they're always quite a challenge, because although they've got cardboard and paper, they have microplastics in them in terms of the film. I can look into and come back to you with actual stats and figures. I think the tonnage volume that we collect from Tetra Pak recycling is so low that it actually becomes cost prohibitive. But where you do collect it, I believe that we used to have to then transport that, or whoever collected it would have to transport it up to the middle of England to then dispose of it. So in terms of the carbon footprint of trying to recycle those products, it's greater trying to do that than it is disposing of it within the Hampshire boundary. But I'd be happy to follow that up in writing.
David, I think you have a question.
Thank you. Will the food waste recycling count into these numbers? And if so, will the target be increased accordingly?
Yes, so food waste will become part of our recyclable count. At the moment, in terms of target, it's a bit because we need to see the take-up rates of the food waste service. What I'm proposing for the following year is that we maintain the measures that we've got because we understand the baseline for these numbers currently. We see what the food waste has by way of implication on that recycling rate, and then we adjust once we've gathered some baseline data on the food waste service. Does that address the question? Okay.
Right. Thank you, Helen. That was your only entry in the charts, so I think we can say goodbye. Now we have an important one, resident satisfaction with the council, another biannual survey, and the service lead is Katie Salis here, so we can look to Katie to give us some background on that. The target was, I think, 75%, is it? And we achieved 74%. Is that right? Yeah.
Thank you. KPI 3.06. So just 3/4 of residents polled in September when we did the survey were satisfied with the way Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council runs things. Satisfaction levels are broadly consistent with the 22 survey that we did, where it was 75%. When comparing our overall satisfaction to the national average recorded in the LGA quarterly national polling, we have fared significantly better at 19% higher than the average. I think it's just worth drawing out that in the 2022 survey compared to the average, that run at 63% to our 75, whereas now it's 54 to our 74. So I think that is encouraging that we have sustained the level of satisfaction that we have. It's not to say that we will not do more to try and engage with people so they understand more about what the council is doing, the decisions we make, etc. And so the narrative refers to improvement plans, which are our service plans that each area is developing at the moment, and looking at how we can reach residents and engage with them more and publicise more the work of the council to raise people's awareness there. The other things that were notable amongst the residents that were surveyed, the residents aged 75 or over are the most satisfied at 83%. Employment status also affected how people felt. So it's employed residents are more satisfied with the way council runs things. So 75% of employed people were happy. And those who are unemployed or on long-term sick. And also from an accommodation perspective as well, residents who live in a housing association rent are less satisfied with the way the council runs things than residents who rent from a private landlord. So they were just some of the outcomes of that question when it was broken down. But as I say, we are doing more in the coming year to engage with residents to raise the profile of what the council does.
Thanks, Katie. Right. Councillor Jones.
Just an observation, really, that over the years, residents in housing associations still maintain that it's a council doing a lot of the things that their housing association should be done. And they feel, and to be honest, and I don't disagree with some of them, they feel as if they've been robbed over the years because of the rents and everything else, whereas people living in council accommodation, which we haven't got, pay a lot less rents than what they do.
Interesting observation, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carr.
Thank you for this. In the breakdown of the reasons why people aren't satisfied with the council, is there any kind of reference or indication to say services that aren't provided by Basingstoke and Dean? So I think if you're a resident, you think of the council rather than necessarily just differentiating between county services and borough services. And we've already mentioned the reduced levels of satisfaction in certain circumstances. I'm just wondering, in the qualitative, maybe open answers to this question, is there any kind of indication that people are dissatisfied with other organisations rather than our own? I think, while we have a two-tier system, there's possibly going to be the risk of confusion there.
The people that do the survey do at the beginning have a postcard to show what is the county council, what is the borough council. So we make that distinction, but we don't really repeat that. The questions are then based around the services we provide, but we know certainly from customer contact, people don't make that differential as they don't with the housing associations between county and borough, but we don't examine any further where their perceptions are coming from. We just ask those questions.
So would it be useful when we do the survey again to sort of almost follow up this question very immediately with, if you aren't satisfied, if no, why? Because I think we almost need to capture almost immediately after that question why people said they weren't satisfied. Because I think I'd be interested in digging underneath that negative sentiment to see where that's something that we can do something differently and where that's another partner and potentially that's a message we can pass on.
So for some of our service specific questions, we did indeed then clarify, have you tried to contact the council about this? What was your experience? We didn't on this sort of high level question, but we sought to drill down where we could. It's like people being satisfied about the website and things like that. We drilled down a bit further so we had something that we could actually act on and seek to improve.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, right, okay. Thank you very much, Katie, for that. Now, if I could turn to Chief Financial Officer, Adam Swain. This is, you've got a pair here, and they're related. Collection of council tax and council and business rates. Both got targets of 99%, and you narrowly missed those with the collection rates in excess of 97%. So again, if you'd like to comment on that, Adam, that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think for those of you previous quarterly meetings, the explanation will be the same, that unfortunately this predominantly relates to one business on the business rates, which also has some flats that owe us quite a lot of debt, are in financial position, so we're not able to recover that. So that is broadly why we're under target. Obviously, we have improved our collection since Q1 and Q2, and we are slightly up on last year. Council tax was around 97.4%, so we're 97.5%, and business rates was 97.1% this time last year, and we're at 97.7%. The team obviously keep on pursuing debt that's due to us, and I expect this to increase slightly as we get towards the year end. And we obviously encourage things like for council taxpayers direct debits and spreading across the year as well, which obviously helps with collection and getting payments and things. But yeah, so that's predominantly why there is one business that owes us a substantial amount that's unfortunately in insolvency, so we're unable to collect that. So that's impacting on our collection rate.
And nothing about council tax. You want to say anything?
That again covers council tax too. They also have a number of flats that are, I think they are attracting a 400% council tax surcharge because they've been empty for a number of years. So that obviously has an impact as well, because again they're not able to pay for that. So that will impact on our collection rate for council tax as well as business rates.
Thanks, Adam. Questions for Adam? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Beyond the single business and the homes they own that you mentioned, are there any common factors in the properties where we're having less collection of council tax? Are there any? Is it a common type of person, certain areas of the borough? And I guess a similar question around business rates as well. Aside from that one business, are there similarities or commonalities on that business rate area of difficulty?
I can't comment specifically on that. I can look and see whether there are trends and ask the team obviously for that. I think nationally we've seen, particularly in council tax, but also in business rates, a decline over the past sort of 5 years in council tax collection. I think last year the average nationally was 95.9%, and ours was obviously a lot. It was higher than that, and for business rates was 97.2, which again has come down from sort of higher sort of 98s. I think it's a sign of kind of the economic climate of recent years. The cost of living crisis, obviously, while council tax is a statutory debt and a priority debt and should be paid first, is obviously difficult for families, and the team work with them to ensure that they're entitled to the support that we offer as part of our council tax support scheme. And we do obviously take as much action as we can in terms of enforcement where that's appropriate, particularly targeting those who are willfully non-payers of council tax, particularly, and that has resulted in, as I think I've said to this committee before, prosecution, and somebody did actually go to prison for failure to pay their council tax, I think last year. But again, there are consequences for that, which has helped. There are a few persistent non-payers which we do target, but generally it's across the board, and it will be to do with individual financial circumstances, both for businesses as well as individual families.
Thank you for that. And then a separate question. How do our rates of collection on council tax and business rates compare with Hart and Rushmore? Are there similar levels, or are we doing better? I think the comparison would be interesting.
Off the top of my head, I can't quite remember. I think we are up the top end of the Hampshire districts, but I can't remember where Hart and Rushmore are in that. As say, nationally we're performing well, but I think again across Hampshire is around sort of this rate as well. We're not significantly different, so I would imagine they're similar rates as well.
Julian?
Yes, just are we coming out of the shadow of COVID? Did the higher level of deaths, I think there was, in that period in any way distort this figure, and are we through that now?
I think so in terms of COVID, but obviously there was the Ukraine energy spikes and that straight after, which again is muddying that. I think nationally there are increases in collection rate, and we are seeing that, as I say, we are slightly up on last year, and I think we will end the year slightly up. But we don't know what's coming. There's many economic headwinds which may impact families and businesses as well, which could arguably impact this again. So, but our collection rates have remained well above kind of national averages over the past few years. We've done well on that, but it is increasingly challenging for the team to carry on. But we are working to ensure that we're collecting the tax due, because it's not just the tax for this council, it's obviously for other partners too, and central government in relation to business rates.
Right, thank you, Adam, very much for that. Stand down. So now we've got the last one, which is the total average work days lost across the organisation due to sickness absence, quarter by quarter. The target is 1.63 work days per average work days lost per quarter for all staff, and the quarter three outcome was 1.92. So missed the target, and so we've got the service lead Sarah Cragg with us this evening. Good evening, Sarah, and so if you could talk to this, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Isaac, and good evening to you and the rest of the committee. So, as you will note from the report, while sickness has reduced from the Q2 level of 2.13 days to 1.92 in Q3, this does remain, as you've highlighted, above that quarterly target of 1.63 days overall. So, as mentioned really in the report, I think it's important to say the Council continues to provide a range of preventative and reactive measures to support staff, both to maintain their health and also to support them during periods of ill health, and that's underpinned by the sickness management process within the Council. We've recently launched some updated sickness absence management training to ensure that the skills of managers are up to date in terms of appropriately managing sickness within their teams. But I think, and I know we've had this conversation before, it's really important to always note that sickness does continue to be proactively managed across the organisation. So as an example, during that Q3, we had 15 members of staff who had a long-term absence that either went into Q3 or went across that quarter. And of those 15, only 2 of them remain off sick currently. So I just want to be really clear that this isn't a picture that we have individuals that continue to remain absent for many, many months and years. This is, an active process where we do seek to return individuals to work whenever and as soon as we can do so. And that actually, if individuals are so unwell that they are not able to return to work, that they have the dignified sort of exit from the organisation that they deserve in light of the service that they've given to the council and its residents. So very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Right. Any member got any questions on this topic? Councillor Jones.
Well, it's about the indices and everything else. That if you've got people long-term sick, which is months, I suppose, would be talking long-term, should they not be taken out of the picture so it gives you a true reflection on what's actually happening in the business? You're always going to have people who've got cancer or whatever, or heart problems, and you know they're going to be off for a period of time, and surely it would be better to even if you kept separate stats on that. But the way this is working, you could have, for whatever reason, you could have half of certain ages all working together. They could all get different sort of diseases which are long term, and you come here, you haven't hit your target or whatever. And I just think that we're not. I know what you're saying, looking after people, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at, we got all these people out sick, or we lose so many days. We should really have, I believe we should have a separate stat on long-term sick and average sick, if you see what, and that shouldn't be in there.
Thank you for your question and your comments. I think it's really important, isn't it, for us to think about why it is that this is a key performance indicator in the first place. And I think that is about recognising that there is an impact to the organisation when individuals are absent due to sickness. That's not to suggest that that's anything that they can control, but I think we have to recognise there is an impact to the workforce when there are individuals who aren't present within it, and that's why this is a key performance indicator. I think in the narrative I do always sort of try and cover the percentage of that is short term and the percentage of that is long term. Give or take, that is almost always 50-50 or in that duration. So it's typically about 50% that is short term and about 50% that is long term, whilst we do manage those slightly differently, and the interventions through things like occupational health counselling, etc., are different depending on whether individuals are short or long-term sickness. I think it's important to recognise that the number of days that are impacted and the days that individuals aren't at work are key for us to be aware of, and I think that's the case whether they're on short-term or long-term sickness absence, because obviously individuals may not be able to help being off on short-term sickness absence any more than they can help being off with some of the long-term conditions that you've identified. But yes, of course, we will always have individuals who unfortunately are off long-term with things like brain tumours, cancer and other significant illnesses, and it's really important that we support them to be able to return to work if at all possible, but also that we manage that short term. So I think it's important they're both in here, albeit we tackle them quite differently.
Councillor Tuck.
Thank you. Can you give me any, I think it's a bit the same, further breakdown of the identifying illnesses? So I've looked at that CIPD report that was referenced in the request for a change to this metric that we'll discuss later. But I'd like to understand a bit more about the nature of some of those illnesses. For instance, the CRPD splits it into minor illnesses, musculoskeletal injuries, mental ill health, and COVID-related stuff. So is there a kind? Can you give me a sort of broad brushstrokes indicator?
So yes, I can do, and also more than happy to share it with you. So this is something that we do share on a 6-monthly basis at HR committee, so that information is available and in the public domain. So for us, consistently in the 5.5 years that I've been here, our main reason for sickness absence generally across is always anxiety, stress and depression. That mental health side is always our most prolific reason, if I can use that phrase, for sickness absence. That's why a lot of the work that we have done around wellbeing has had that mental ill health focus. That's not to say that there aren't other things on there, but typically that is almost always the top reason. The other ones do change. So last year, for example, I believe our second highest was musculoskeletal. That's been much lower in the ones that have come up this year, and we've had cancers which have featured higher this time round. Obviously, in an organisation of our size, you can have a relatively small number of staff with a particular thing, and that can cause it to be much higher in the sort of rankings, if you like, of reasons for absence. So that's why they can change quite significantly. But as I say, overall for us, it is almost always anxiety, stress, depression that forms our top reason for sickness absence.
Councillor Jones.
You mentioned mental health issues. Has anybody looked into the reason why staff are going down with those sort of things? Is it pressure of work or what? Sorry.
So there are some cases where there have been something that's potentially work related or work that's contributed to it. I think one of the challenges around mental ill health is that it can be quite difficult to separate those things out between what might be happening at home. So some, for example, if there's a bereavement, is very clearly home related. If someone has an underlying mental health condition, for example, that could be something that's exacerbated by something at home that's then exacerbated again by being at work because they're finding things difficult anyway. So it can be very difficult for us to split those down. What I would say is that we do always look at those things on an individual basis. So we have a range of support that we can offer, things like our employee assistance programme and our counselling service. We do find sometimes that staff can struggle to access mental health services within the NHS. I think we are all aware that there is pressure within that sector. So we try and do as much as we can through the resources we have available to support. But obviously there is a line beyond which our counselling provision cannot cover some of those NHS required services for some of our staff.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much for that. Have we got any comments overall about the Q3 KPIs? I would just say that some of the ones that are met, I struggle with in terms of how they're being measured. They seem to be sort of being self-marked by the officers. Things like the community furniture project, there's no timetable that I can see attached to it, but it's apparently on schedule. So I think there's perhaps some work needed on that, and KPI 2.12 and KPI 2.13 are in the same sort of category. So perhaps that would be my one of my observations. Any other comments from the committee? No? Right, okay. So if we now could move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the proposals to make some alterations to the KPIs, some cases making them tougher, and in other cases less so. Again, if I could invite the portfolio holder, the leader, to to introduce the paper, then we can hear a bit of background from Katie Salis.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, these are the iterative, forward-looking proposals for KPIs, and very welcome to receive comments and advice from the committee to take forward. and look forward to the conversation. Officers have been meticulous in going through where they feel both increases and decreases, reductions and increases, where they feel the explanation is here set out quite clearly, the arguments being made for the KPIs. But I welcome the conversation with yourselves, and let's see where will we go on this and take that away for reflection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Katie, do you want to say anything by way of intro?
Thank you. Yes, just to reiterate, really, this is part of our ongoing journey to improve how we present and articulate our key performance indicators as an organisation. So we would welcome your comments, because we found the scrutiny last year a valuable step in giving us the set of measures we have now, but recognise there is always more we can do in this area to get the benefit from them.
Okay, now there are about 20 of these proposed changes, and what I propose to do is just go through them one by one, but we don't have to comment on every one of them, so if we can restrain ourselves. Annual reduction in council operational emissions as per climate change strategy. Current target 45%, proposed target 5%. Anyone? Yes? All right, well, Councillor Gold.
So obviously this is all to do with our climate change emergency, which, looking around, I think only 4 of us were around for declaring, but I remember it. And the key part of that was that we wanted our borough council's operations to be carbon neutral by 2025. So my question is, with this 5% target, is that going to be right? Because the deadline is December. And if the answer to that is no, then my answer to your suggestion of 5% is that I'm not happy with it.
I think you made your point. Yep, right, okay, thank you. Increase in the proportion of low carbon vehicles operated by the council. 3%, currently proposed 2% increase. Any comments? No? Councillor James.
It's the same question. You know, you're reducing something, and it's all to do with carbon emissions. At the end of the day, that's maybe only 1%. But all our vehicles should be eventually turned over. Now, there may be a reason for this. If someone's got one, I don't know.
Well, it's a decrease of a third, isn't it?
It's also a reflection of the amount of the fleet that has now gone over to electric and over to HVO. So there is a method in the calculation of officers reflecting the actual changes that are being made, but I take away the comment.
Thank you, Paul. Right, next, Councillor Golding.
Could I therefore suggest something very controversial? Could we change our target that we want a percentage of our vehicles to be electric rather than a percentage change? Because a percentage of our vehicles actually means something, but a percentage change is a bit nebulous.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck.
Sorry, I think the reason you can't do everything is that there are some types of vehicles that we use for, you know, range teeny type stuff that aren't made electric or HVO kind of thing. I think there was a limitation like that.
No, not at all. There is some. We've got to understand that. Happy to take that away. We will never have 100%, because at the moment there are certain vehicles and certain machines that unfortunately there is no alternative yet invented for. Yet, and that's the point. Yet, as soon as we have availability of that technology, from our perspective, we're turning over as quickly as we can. So actually, the team have done really well in terms of, first of all, getting the waste fleet onto HVO, which is hugely significant. And I know Helen's out the back, there's a huge amount of work on that. I think it's interesting in the operational fleet, and Tom can speak more to this than I can, but I do think the changes to electric vehicles in the operational fleet has been significant and has made a big difference as well. I'll let Tom know more than that than I do if you want to answer the question.
That's a good it's good to tell us about that, but surely you should be telling, not you personally or an officer, should be explaining that to us what we're talking about. You know, if you can't, I don't know what vehicles can't be changed or what can be changed. I'm no expert. And if we were told or given a briefing on that, it would it makes sense. But we don't seem to. We seem to come to the committee and want to discuss something and find that, well, that was a waste of time of a question because we can't get there, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
And we can set that away and come back with that. I'm looking at Tom. We can take that away and come back with that information. Tom's nodding his head. Yes, we can. We can answer the question, Tony, for you, so we'll do that.
Julian.
Yes, I'm not absolutely clear what this covers. Do we actually lease any of these vehicles? Are they on contract, or are they all owned by the council?
Those covered in this KPI are ours, so I'm looking at Tom directly and he's indicating.
Okay, the next proposed change, annual reduction in total greenhouse gas emissions in the borough to meet the 2030 target. No change in the 5% target. Anyone? No. Next one, number of borough council funded electric vehicle charging points from 64 down to 60. Any questions on that? Ensure provision of electric vehicle charging points in all wards in the borough. That we're proposing to delete this target as is going to be achieved, which is good news. Number of people provided with in-person advice by the Green Team. The Green Team want to cover more people, so from 1,100 currently as a target, they want to go up to 1,300. Presumably nobody has any problems with that. Number of surveys undertaken. I don't know what surveys they are, but 450 at the moment and no change. What sort of surveys are they?
On the description, Chair, so garden surveys, small business surveys, surveys of home energy. It's the variety of surveys we undertake with various teams.
Thank you, yeah. Councillor Golding.
Thank you. What are we going to do with those 200 extra people that the Green Team are talking to them if they happen to want a survey but we're not doing any more? Does that make sense? I just feel like if you're increasing one to not increase the other feels weird, and it might make perfect sense, but it doesn't to me with the information I've got.
I think it makes perfect sense to the people that have been proposing the KPI, and I think it does relate to not all of those engagements will result in surveys, obviously, because they'll result in different pieces of advice being given depending upon the circumstance. The Green Team do a huge range of activity. I'd like to take that one away and come back to you on that one, Hannah, actually, if that's okay.
Right, we've got a proposed new indicator, increase the provision of EV chargers in the borough per head of population so that we have 100 per 100,000 residents. Okay. Proposed new indicator, engagement through the council's corporate, social media and digital communications, 10% increase annually. Nope. Okay. The number of residents participating in mental health projects supported by the council. The current target is the number of visits to selected programmes. Proposed to change the wording to wellness rather than mental health. Is that the extent of it? Right. Councillor Carr.
I'd be curious about the rationale for that, because I'm also looking at the KPI below. Mental health and physical health seem to me quite precise and clear objectives, whereas wellness seems to be quite broad, quite nebulous, quite amorphous. And I'm really wondering whether that has much value. Because if I think of wellness, I'm thinking of like some kind of spa day or something. So I'm not quite sure what it is it means in the local government context. So I'd be grateful for your clarification of what you mean.
Sorry, I apologise. It means far more than that in a health context, and with all due respect, I respect what you're saying. It does mean a significant difference in the health context, and Sarah can give us that in the sense of HR and a HR perspective. But from our point of view, I'm sure if you look at this, the actual what we're measuring, it's the number of visits to selected programmes. So these are specific measurements related to the programmes that are being offered. The point about the number of residents participating in wellness projects supported by the council, it gives us a broader range of the projects, is my understanding. And in terms of the other point, because it was related to the next one down, as you rightly say, number of residents participating in physical health projects supported by the council, again, I think it's a more relevant relationship to our health partners. But I'll take that away and we'll have a conversation about that, because you raise a point, and we'll come back with a written answer to explain in more detail.
Thank you. Sam, again?
It's just a quick follow-up point. Yeah, I think I'm not fully convinced at this stage. I think I need to understand what it is that's meant by selected programs, because I think because the word wellness I think is quite broad, and reference to selected programs without real clarification of what those programs are, I'm not currently convinced that the change away from physical and mental health is currently justified. I think if we think about sort of social problems, we've been hearing about the challenges that mental health presents to the workforce. And we know that physical health is a challenge for the general health of the population and living standards. So those feel to me like tangible, real problems that are worth looking at. And I would wonder whether it is sensible to move away from a direct focus on those.
We'll take that away to the service head and come back on that.
Helen would answer that now.
I apologise.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Carr. So the change of the wording is quite specific, and it's driven by the fact that as a council, we don't have any control over the health provision within the borough, because those are services that are run through the NHS and the ICB. So what we mean by the services that have been supported by us are functions that we deliver through either our facilities or grants or funding that we provide to third parties. So the way that we do this at the moment is the only way, for example, we can count improvements that we make in somebody's obesity levels or mental health is actually through the participation rates in things that we actually run, because we can't interact with somebody in terms of their shopping or in terms of the support they may get from their GP. We can, however, liaise with the GPs and utilise GP referral programmes to get people into our gyms or into swimming programmes. So what we're proposing to do is to continue to count, we currently do that annually, the number of people that participate in dedicated groups. So we have cardiac rehab, cancer rehab, people with Parkinson's, Steady and Strong, Mind in Sport, Relax Kids. We have specific programmes that we fund or part fund or enable to be carried out through our facilities. And in the annual figure that will come to committee on Q4, we actually list what those numbers look like and all of the participants in them. So we've removed the word health because we're not a health provider, but we're more around the preventative work around the wellbeing agenda. I hope that helps.
Councillor Golding.
Can I just slightly clarify, and I suspect it's actually just a typo, is the new KPI going to read the number of residents participating in mental wellness projects supported by the council, or just wellness projects?
Sorry, so there are two sets of counts we run. One is specific to projects that support mental wellness. The other supports the reduction of obesity. Largely that is driven around participation in sport or in physical activity, because not everybody's keen on sport.
So it'll come under two headings then?
Yeah, there are two separate KPIs. One, I believe, is for mental wellness, and the other is for reduction of obesity. They're the 3 key markers on the wellbeing strategy.
Thank you very much, Helen. Yeah, right. So the next one is partner satisfaction with working with the council. Current target's 85%, and the proposal is to do away with it because there's no mechanism to measure. Anyone got any questions on that? Yeah, right. Ladies first, then. Councillor Golding.
I don't like it. I think it's probably the most important thing that we do is work with partners, and making sure that we're a good partner. I do think we need a bit of a benchmark and a bit of a health check on that. Otherwise, we can think we're wonderful and we might not be. That's the whole point of having KPIs. So I genuinely appreciate it's very difficult to measure, and it doesn't feel like the resident survey would be the. I assume that's not what it's. Oh, is that what you were trying to measure it with? Yeah, that wasn't going to work. But I guess my feedback was I think we should come up with a better way rather than remove it entirely.
Councillor Carr.
Yes, I'm not totally convinced by removing it in its entirety. I mean, if I think about the business I'm in, we run annual client satisfaction surveys. You know, it's useful sometimes to get a sense every so often of how one is perceived by others. There are going to be partners who are going to be cross with us, and then sometimes if we're doing our job, they will be, because if we're holding an organisation, say, that's not doing its job to account, and they might subsequently be grumpy with us, but that's because we've done our job standing up for residents. But I think let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater wholly. I wondered, though, whether one thing we could add to this is including our parish councils in the surveys of satisfaction that we do run. Because I think so much of what we do as local councillors and so much of the relationship we have as a borough council to our residents flows through our parishes. And that relationship needs to work across the borough. And if there are areas where our parishes feel they're not getting the right kind of treatment from this council, I think that's something we should be picking up on.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Parishes are an important conduit. But also, I mean, typically you do 360-degree survey and you would send that out to your a random selection of different types of organisation and individuals that you work with and wait for the feedback to come back, I don't think it's a survey as such, it's a 360.
I think there's a sort of strong consensus here. Councillor Jones.
When you're talking about parish councils, I don't know anything about them other than living in one and paying money for it. But most of the Basingstoke town area and estates aren't parished. So can we not use a survey where we got community centres and whoever runs them can make their comment? Because they're actually working with officers and on these issues as well.
Right, thank you. Okay, there are a few comments there. Paul?
Yeah, just happy to take both of those away in terms of the parish and community associations, and we'll have a look at the method of question, the actual process of created for the next survey in the next couple of years. Obviously, it's the biannual survey that we're talking about here specifically. Taking that question here out of the survey and then looking at how we can measure and how we can do it, that's perfectly reasoned, and we already do. I think one of the interesting things is pure statistical analysis is one thing, qualitative conversation that achieves a dialogue with our partners. And we have, I mean, we'll come on to this when we talk about our business partnerships. We have incredibly strong relationships there with our partners, and that feedback is almost constant in terms of the ability for us to adjust our services working with them. How you capture it, how we perhaps measure that is an interesting question. Measure is one thing, qualitative analysis another, but I'll take that away and discuss that with the team.
Right, next one is place-based marketing and digital and social media engagement. There was a current target of 10% increase on the 23-24 outturn, and it's proposed to change it to 5%. as the 10% increase is, quotes, unsustainable. Any comments, Julian?
I'll probably break the rules by going backwards slightly, but does this actually make sense to reduce this when in 4.222 we were increased to 10%? A rather similar measure, were we not?
Yeah, I think they are different things.
Are the two actions compatible? Okay.
I think the point that was being made for this one, this used to report annually and it's coming in quarterly now. So to monitor 10% annually is one thing. 10% every quarter is different. So that's why the proposal's being made.
Right. The next two relate to Treasury management targets, and they're influenced by expected reductions in interest rates. Has any... I wouldn't have thought that was particularly controversial, but does anyone disagree? No. Councillor Carr, you look as though you might do. No, right, okay. Next item is collection rates, which we've discussed earlier, of council tax, and the current target, as we know, is 99%. And Adam, you want to reduce it to 98%. So anyone want to give Adam a hard time about that? Councillor Carr, that's it. Good, yeah.
Sorry, guys. Mr. Chairman, I'm not terribly happy with that decision, really, because I do think that this is one of our absolutely unavoidable statutory duties, and I think it kind of sends the wrong signal to residents and the wrong signal to government about what it is we're doing. We've just had a conversation earlier about how important it is, the action we're taking to collect those taxes. Taxes should be as low as possible, but where we are collecting taxes, we've got to do it properly. And I'm not sure how that conversation fits with this signal we're now sending that we're dropping it down the agenda slightly. I don't really want us in these KPIs to go down to the lowest common denominator, which fundamentally is the rationale set out. I'm not really convinced by this.
Adam.
Welcome your feedback on that. I think I like to just highlight the fact that the national rate last year was 95.9%, so this is still, excuse me, well above that, and reflects the fact that, as I've talked about in the KPIs, nationally rates have gone down. We've kept our target a lot higher. This target would still be a stretch on what we're achieving this year and expect to. But I think it's a balance of trying to set a realistic KPI rather than one that's far stretched and is going to be constantly missed. Happy to keep it at 99 if that's the view of the committee. But I was trying to put a bit of realism into this and reflect the national trend that council tax collection has gone down significantly over recent years, and we have not done that and have been under this target for the past 5 years.
Jonathan.
I mean, it showed on the paper earlier that we saw that you hadn't met the 99% target, and unachievable targets are pointless. They're not measuring anything. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to lower it.
Hannah.
I don't want to put you in a difficult position here, but we were told you weren't meeting it because of one business. So changing the target because we've got one dodgy business that has flats feels, I don't know, not right. Because presumably at some point that's going to get sorted out, and then we should go back to meeting the higher target again if that's the only thing that's wrong and not just a national trend.
Yeah, there is one that has 25 flats at 4 times the council tax rate, so that is a significant part of that, and you are correct. If the new owner of that business, which hopefully will be resolved in the next coming few months, starts paying the council tax, yes, that will help improve it, and it might increase us above that target of 98, and then we would of course look at it for the future years. As I say, I'm more than happy to keep it at 99, but it feels like a challenging target anyway, well above the national average, which we are still achieving. But it's going to be me coming to you. If you want to see me every quarter, that's absolutely fine. More than happy to do so. But I'm just trying to put a bit of realism. We haven't changed the business rates one because actually we do think that one business there, but we have seen, as say, a national trend. So we do expect it to get harder to be collecting council tax rather than easier in future years. But we can see.
Julian.
Continuing on that point, would it be better to delay this change? I'm sympathetic to the change, but until that has worked out in the system.
Again, if that's a feedback of the committee, we'll take that back and discuss that with cabinet and reflect on those comments, and we'll take that on board.
Right, thank you. Now I noticed that under property and assets, debt collection rates, the current target from for the property team is 95%, and they're sort of looking to bring you alongside them. Are you sort of supportive of that? Presumably you are.
I think it's the other way around. Previously it was one that was my KPI, I think property and assets, but my Exchequer team manage that on their behalf, so I think it's just joining up. It's not changing the KPI, it's just reflecting the fact that property and assets obviously are the managing that, but my team support that.
Thank you very much for explaining that. Right, thank you, Adam, very much. Next one is about housing and low-cost home ownership. Currently the target is 2 events delivered and 70 people attending. The proposal is that we move to a measure customer satisfaction rather than numbers attending. Anyone got any views on that? Councillor Golding.
I felt very mixed on this one because I couldn't find the KPI in our report that we had this time. So presumably it's just not reported on this quarter. But it's a bit, without knowing how many people have been attending, I don't know. It's just one of those things because you can have great feedback from 3 people, but that doesn't mean that it's an effective event. Whereas at least attendance, I don't know, ideally you want both, don't you? You want 70 people there and you want them all to say it was wonderful.
Yes, there's something more reassuring about quantitative rather than qualitative, isn't there?
I'm going to challenge that a little on the basis of what this is, because I think the qualitative customer satisfaction related to this particular KPI, related to people's experience, why they're there and the purposes and the outcomes from it are really important to capture as well. I think that would be a more meaningful KPI, which is then not taking away the point that you raised, which is just recording the number of people that attend is fine, but it doesn't give us anything beyond that. And I think what lies behind this is actually a deeper understanding of the person's or the people's experience at the event itself. That, for information for the team, I think would be more meaningful in that sense.
So we might have both.
You could have both, yeah, there's no reason why not. But bearing in mind that simply knowing how many people turn up at an event is all that says, nothing more than that.
Fine. Hannah, are you finished on that? Councillor Carr.
I'm sympathetic to the leader's position. I think there needs to be perhaps something about translation rates within that customer satisfaction measure, because customer satisfaction is quite a broad set of categories. I think my question would be how many people at the end of this are benefiting from one of the various schemes that are being showcased at these events.
Well, I take that away as 3 different things then, because then that's a different thing to customer satisfaction, but I'll take that away as well on the basis that outcome is one thing, customer satisfaction of the event itself and signposting, because a lot of this also is signposting to other agencies and other partners, and then a simple de facto measure of how many people were at the event.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Now, there are a couple here relating to planning appeals, majors and non-majors. It's quite. I think they're sort of technical changes, really related to measuring over 2 years rather than 1 year, and I don't think they're particularly sort of controversial. But has anyone got any points on those? No. Okay. Fine. Thank you. And then we go to human resources and the total average work days lost due to sickness absence quarter by quarter. Current target, as we know, is 1.63 days, and the proposal is to increase that to 1.95 days per quarter. Sarah, I think might be handy to have you come up and give a bit of background on that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, more than happy to do so. So if I just go through a couple of points, and then obviously more than happy to take any questions. So I think just to expand a little bit on the narrative that's in there. So the proposal to change this target is on the basis that nationally sickness has increased over the last 10 years, but our target's been the same for at least the 5.5 years that I've worked here, and I know it was the same when I came into post. So we are looking to change that from an annual target of 6.52 up to 7.8, and as you say, that equates to going up to 1.95 per quarter. So as per the comments, this is based on that most recent sort of CIPD report. That 7.8 days is the average across public and private sector. So public sector only is 10.6 days. So I think it's really important that increasing to 7.8 days is not saying that we don't want to set something that's very stretching. That's still significantly below the public sector. So we are still looking at something that is going to be very challengeable and very challenging for us to reach. But I think we recognise that, as I say, sickness is currently running at that highest level in a decade, and we're continuing to measure something from 5-6 years ago. So actually we're continuing to have a target back there. Everything else has gone higher. I don't necessarily need to go into potentially access to health services and other things that people would have had 10 years ago that's very different. But there are things that affect the duration of our staff being off that have increased that are entirely outside of our control. So there is, of course, a core element of it that we can do through our support, our prevention, our reactive measures, but there are also elements that will affect individual sickness, pandemic result of that, access to services, etc., that are entirely outside of our control as an organisation. So we're in a situation with a target that is potentially not realistic, the size of our organisation, a small number of staff off, having that increase in that percentage, a target that we've maintained for at least 6 years, but I think a little longer than that. And we're in that sort of not best practice situation of setting a target that we know we're unlikely to meet, and potentially by doing that, we actually mask potential fluctuations in what we're doing around sickness. So if we have a target that's more realistic, we're then able to monitor against that and see if there are particular spikes, whereas at the moment everything is a spike, so it almost becomes meaningless, if you see what I mean. So I think it's about something that is realistic but still very stretching when you put it against the public sector, and as I say, in line with that public-private sector average. So that is still going to be challenging for us as an organisation, but challenging rather than almost impossible.
Right, any questions or comments? Kate.
Hi, thank you very much for that. I mean, I think it's incredibly important as a responsible employer that we look after health and well-being of our employees. So I mean, take that as a given. But I don't quite agree with you on the changing the number of days. Looking at that CIPD document, page 29, their average number of days lost per employee per year by sector is showing from 2011 to 2020. It pretty much bobbles along, almost straight line. And then from 2020, you get that uplift. My thinking would be COVID isn't surely not going to last forever in its repercussions, accepting that there are ongoing repercussions with the health service and things working their way through the system with delays. So I accept there's a kind of lumpiness there. But that gives you an uptick just in the last 3 years. So if we were to look at something that said, hang on, over 10 years, more than that actually it hasn't moved that much except at the last bit. I kind of wouldn't support changing that as an average. I'd be saying do you know what, we've had COVID, we've had some difficult times. It's going to take perhaps a little bit of time to work through all of those things, but I wouldn't want to be changing our baseline target on the basis of that. And we're still looking at that in the middle. I accept what you're saying about public sector employees is the top line of the graph in terms of most number of days off, but and that you're not picking that mean, you're picking a mid-range between that and the private sector. But even so, on the private sector services, you're looking at an average of 5.8 days or so. And so I'm just kind of going, no, I don't. I think we should be more ambitious about that. And I think we should be looking, it's not good for staff members to be off unless they absolutely need to be, in which case, of course, I support them being off. But it's one of those things that I wouldn't want to change that target at all.
Thank you, Kate. Anyone else got to contribute? Andrew.
Can I just say that one of the difficulties the NHS has got is not the post-COVID sort of hump. It's a huge decrease in workforce, and that is making a huge impact, especially on mental health services that people can access in the community at the moment. So waiting lists are now currently running at about 2 years, just for an initial assessment, and that is something that we've seen partly post-Brexit, changes to workforce patterns. So I actually think the target is realistic. So I would personally support it for the reasons given.
Jonathan.
Once again, I worked with Sarah at the HR committee and the JCC committee, and we spoke at length about the target being changed and the reason for the target. And I think the important point that was highlighted was almost the last point that was made by Sarah, that because everything is currently in the red, it means that we're not able to measure when things are better and worse, because everything is worse at the moment. So I think that I think it's a good thing to change it to reflect the changes in society, the changes in the NHS, etc. And I support the change.
Anyone else got any questions? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Kate on this, Councillor Tuck. I think there's something about holding to the previous baseline that we had, recognising that there are some changes that have happened recently, but that we know the standard that we want to hold to, that we want to get back to. I don't think it really sends the right signal to the organisation. It feels like we would be putting less emphasis and priority on this, less recognition that this is a problem. There is a broader point about how public sector productivity hasn't entirely gone back to its pre-COVID position. I don't think we want to step back from the priority that we're placing on this, and I don't therefore support the change. I think the other point, I'm a little bit sceptical of the argument that just because something is red doesn't mean that you don't look at the raw number underneath that. So I'm not convinced that's necessarily an argument for this change.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Without being ingenuous, Sarah, you're an HR professional. Why is the sickness rate in the public sector so different to the private sector?
So I think there are a whole range of reasons for that. I think typically in the public sector there are certain terms and conditions that are nationally set, including things like sickness pay. So certain, for example, private sector organisations will withhold pay for the first 1 or 2 days that you're absent. That's not something that's ever been done in the public sector, and I think there are some real concerns around that, because you end up with a culture of presenteeism where people turn up not very productively, but they turn up because if they don't get paid, and you then have people potentially off for longer or have other issues because they've turned up when maybe they weren't well enough to do so. I think there are also other practices that are maybe open to private sector that are less open to us. If someone has particular sickness, there are abilities to maybe pay people off in the way that we just wouldn't do in the public sector. We would support people till we get to the point that we realise actually if they're not able to return to work, we give them that dignified exit from the organisation. Doesn't mean we leave people on the books for years, but it does mean we give them enough time to try and recover from whatever it is that they're absent with. I think just to pick up on the 10-year point, absolutely in terms of the graph, but I think what I would say is that public sector line has been significantly above what we have set as our target since 2011. It's running constantly sort of just below 8 to above 9 days, and we're looking at just over 6 or about 6.5. So we are always running with something that is significantly more challenging than other public sectors, and that is always going to present us with a challenge.
Thank you very much. That was very useful. I think it's a worrying trend in terms of the levels of sickness, both in terms of the effects on the individuals and also in terms of the effects of colleagues who have to pick up the work when others are away, and productivity levels generally. So I think as a committee we've got some mixed views on this particular KPI, but we're not the decision makers, and we can look to our councillor on the left here to take away from what he's heard tonight. Okay.
As the portfolio holder for HR, I've heard what you've said, and I'll take it into account when we set the actual KPI.
Thank you. Right. So the last proposed changes relates to major projects. So I think Sarah and Andrew and the rest of the team, if you could come up, that might be helpful, and just explain what it is that you're wanting to change.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So I think over the last couple of years, certainly since I've joined, there's been different ways of reporting on major projects, and I think it's important to recognise that a lot of the major projects are long-term endeavours for the authority, and sometimes it's quite difficult to shoehorn specific KPIs or specific measures into a sort of set annual KPI period. And I think we found, particularly in the 24-25 reporting cycle, where we've switched to a high-level milestone reporting mechanism, some of those milestones have very quickly fallen out of sync for different reasons, sometimes for internal, sometimes for external factors. And we cite an example on here, like the new leisure centre, for example. When we set the milestones, the high-level milestone reporting for that specific project, it was based on going through a DBOM, a design, build, operator, maintain, procurement route, with an overarching programme and a timeline attached to that. Sort of part way through that process and that decision making, and from setting that milestone KPI, the national sort of procurement regulations changed, and actually changed to the better, where we could take advantage of delaying going out into the marketplace with our tender documents until the new procurement rules came in, because that would ultimately allow us more flexibility through a competitive dialogue tendering process, and ultimately will allow us to make sort of time savings during the total project lifespan to 29-30. As I said, we're talking over longer terms. So I think we felt every time we were reporting on some projects where we were out of sync with milestones, you were constantly in the red, and there was no point during that cycle to actually amend a milestone KPI and give the justification and the narrative for that. So I think the rationale behind what's being proposed here now, to sort of put it in more in line with the council's project management reporting system, highlight reporting system, and what comes through that governance structure to SLT, is actually to give a more rounded view of the project and give you more information. So it's not just on the high-level milestone reporting that you can see and scrutinise. You're looking at any changes in project scope, the budget, or the progress of that. And I think KPIs are important and they play a role, and there are certain key milestones in our major projects that absolutely, if they fall within the annual period, we would want to recognise and would want to be included. But rather than have that as the narrative and the KPI title, include that within the overall project update that you're getting, so you can clearly see what KPIs and what milestones are within that project for that year. And it just gives that ability to look at it against a RAG status and give a more rounded narrative, I suppose. That's the rationale behind it. It's hopefully be more transparent and give you more information on the projects, because obviously there's a lot more reporting that we undertake through our Verto system that comes through our SLT and the PMO structure. But I think recognising the importance of the of the committee of having the milestones, it's just presentation.
Committee, any questions? Councillor Carr.
So if I've understood that correctly, we wouldn't have any update on our major projects progress for 6 months. So you'd have 6 months would pass, 6 months would go. It feels to me that there would be quite a long period where we don't receive an update on how our major projects are progressing, and I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing. I recognise and think there is sense in not seeking to force some of these major projects into KPIs, but I don't think that prevents a written update of some kind, a sort of progress report being appended to the KPIs on that quarterly basis, so we don't go 6 months without knowing what's going on. Obviously, not in Cabinet anymore, so you don't really see quite as much as you used to. But I do feel that for those who haven't been in Cabinet and see actually how much information is available on these projects on an iterative basis, I do think 6 months is a long time, and perhaps far too long a time. So I would encourage, and by all means move ahead with the change to the KPI process, but I do think we need to bring some kind of update on a quarterly basis, even if it's a written narrative of where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I think, yes, we've obviously considered the quarterly and the proposed switch to a 6 monthly reporting. I think it comes back to my key point where a lot of these projects are longer term endeavours. And I think we've reported on a quarterly basis before, and to sit here and just a simple sentence or a couple of lines was there's nothing to report in this period because there may not have been activity is not meaningless. It still provides an update, but I would like things to be sort of more tangible and more beneficial for the committee. So I think what's being proposed on a 6 monthly basis and as part of more of a RAG sort of project update is 6 monthly. You would get a sort of an activity, obviously you're going to be sort of 6 monthly in advance, aren't you? What's proposed within that 6 month period, and then also what is proposed in the next 6 months period. So when you get to the next 6 months checkpoint, you'll have a check looking back on what's been achieved as well as what you're looking forward to the next 6 months, rather than just a quarterly no update in this because the bulk of activity is in the next quarter or the third quarter. I don't know if that.
Councillor Carr.
Just a brief follow up on that. I hear what you're saying, and I understand that those 6 monthly points are going to be meatier, but I do think these are projects of real significance to the future of this borough, and I think if a resident said to us, how's Maydown going and how's Basing View going, and I said, "I'll come back in 6 months," I don't know. They'll tell us in 6 months. I don't think that's a more transparent process. I think the opportunity to check in quarterly on how these things are going is important. I recognise, and I think there is merit to what you're saying about how you report from the KPI perspective, but I do think we would be missing something from our overview and scrutiny if there was no update at all of major projects for 6 months, but we may not agree on that.
Paul, do you want to say something?
Thank you, John. Respect the opinion, respect the view. I don't think we're going to agree on it for the very simple reason. I think in terms of managing, and it's not just one project, managing the multiple projects, you're going to have reporting coming in on a 6 monthly basis in a more transparent, meaty fashion, as you've already said, in terms of a substantive report whereby you can get hold of something and have a conversation about it and understand where it's going to next. And I think from that perspective, what the team have proposed, in my opinion, given the way it's been described and what their intention is it will be more meaningful for a scrutiny committee we'd ask the resources committee, or then whatever else it becomes in the future. The point being, it isn't always the case that scrutiny is to do everything every quarter. Sometimes there is an appropriate cycle to the project whereby reviewing it in depth at a point every 6 months, or choosing projects to review on a different basis. Your choice as a committee of what you choose to look at as well becomes part of this, your own work programme, and that is within your own gift as well. So I hear what the officers have proposed, and I understand it from that point of view being a far more meaningful piece of engagement in order to shape and form and direct going forward advice and guidance on the projects.
Yeah, it isn't in our gift because we're not responsible for special projects on this committee. So we have responsibility for scrutiny of KPIs, and I wonder if it's a problem here of being in the red, as it were. But with major projects like that, you start every year with some key milestones that you're going to seek to achieve. And I think that it's helpful for this committee to understand what progress is being made in relation to those key milestones. I think there's an understanding that particularly with long-term projects there is slippage. Is there a problem that with the RAG status that you're feeling that you're sort of inevitably going to be a high probability of being in the red because of the process, and because presumably we could look at resetting?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, all valid points, absolutely. And I think, where I mentioned earlier, if there is a key milestone within the next sort of year that should be pulled out, absolutely that should be pulled out, and that should be within the narrative and reported on within the overall project context. I think what we're proposing won't just look at an overall RAG status. It will give more of a breakdown of a RAG status on the budget, the progress, the scope, if there's been any creep, if there's been any any deviations, any key interdependencies. So you'll have actually several probably RAG statuses in different areas, which will give more of an overall picture than just it's a green, amber, or a red. So, and I don't think we have a problem with being in a red. It's the ability to recognise where that sits within the overall project timeline, the narrative behind that, and the ability for you to have that additional information to scrutinise, which I think this new system will give.
I think there's a concern that we'll end up with sort of general commentary being brought forward, and that there is a benefit in every year. You will start any year, you'll say to yourself, we would hope to achieve such and such during the course of this year, and I think that's a good discipline, and one that I would not be particularly happy to see lost. Any other comments? Councillor Jones. How long have you got?
And I think that varies, Councillor. The new leisure centre, for example, is a 4 to 5 year project from inception through procurement, through ultimately then designing, building out, and getting operational. Many Down is a longer term phased project. There's Many Down North and there's Many Down South. Different deliverables for each parts of those with different time frames, but these are longer term regeneration initiatives. We've got the regeneration of estates, of community areas such as Winklebury, Buckskin and South Ham, whether they're not maybe directly delivered ourselves, but delivered through key strategic partners. These are longer term endeavours, and I think that comes back to my point. It's absolutely relevant that we have a key milestone to be held accountable when that fits within a period, but when it doesn't, you still need the narrative to give you that overall programme and timeline.
But have we got one KPI that relates to all of the projects? Is that how it works? Because I'm not sure where we are currently.
No, so I think the 25-26 had specific milestones for different projects.
Okay, I think you've got the sense of the concerns about this from the committee about how we really want some sort of blended KPI that will still keep track of progress, but allow you to update the committee and perhaps reset things as things change during the course of the year. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Sarah. Right. I think now that concludes that. Councillor Golding.
Sorry to make it longer. When I was reading through this, and obviously the previous thing, what I kind of felt was missing from the update was a reflection on where we'd done really well, and therefore if we should be changing KPIs because we've exceeded them and have exceeded them solidly over the last quarters. So picking one out, and I appreciate Kate Randall isn't here, but like KPI 1.13, which is minimum of 80% homeless approaches resolved and B&B prevented, like the team's done amazingly this year, but considering from our point of view, you know, it's our residents probably at their most vulnerable when they might come into contact with us. If you're achieving 98 and 97%, then why wouldn't we want our KPI to be 90 or 95% instead of 80?
Right, thank you. I think that's been heard. Right. So if there are no further questions or comments on this particular agenda item, we'll move on to the economy report, and we've got the leader. He's getting the full treatment tonight. If you, Councillor Harvey, if you'd like to introduce this report, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The future economic framework. I mean, over the years, as a council, we have been very good at producing economic strategies, and colleagues sat around this table have been involved in developing them on occasion. What the future economic framework seeks to do is really focus in on the actions and the outcomes. It seeks to reflect the officer's actual work in this sector. I want to commend the officer team because of their work in the business community, and actually the business community reflecting back to them and the feedback that we get from the business community on the excellence of the team. And that flows through where a lot of this strategic perspective can come from, this overview comes from. I want to make it absolutely clear the team are a choice that we make as a council. It is really important that we recognise that. We choose to have this team. So that investment makes a huge difference. So sitting within the strategy is a huge amount of work. Products that we offer as a council to our business community and wider economic partners. Services that we offer to our residents and to organisations in this sector. Our relationships with the business community are incredibly strong. That feedback is an essential part of developing the strategy, developing the framework. And I think it's important to say that we get endorsement for the team's work and the approach they take from that business community. Our economy itself is a real powerhouse in the South East. Our GVA growth last year, and I'm nicking Marilese's thunder here, our GVA growth last year put us in the same league as Oxford, Cambridge and the City of Manchester. Basingstoke's economic position is punching well above our weight simply as a district and a borough. Employment is itself very strong, but we have underlying trends that we need to monitor, particularly around recruitment and retention. And that creates its own issues with a tight labour market. That creates its own dynamic that we need to understand and support our business community, and particularly around skills, and skills really matter in this. That's why I think we have a focus on STEM and future tech, why there is a focus on apprenticeships, training and career development, why that really matters as part of the direction of travel we need to go in. I also want to say that our work on inclusion is a really key strand of the framework, and inclusion in all its senses, but particularly inclusion in the context of those people who sit outside of the current economy and we need to draw in so that they have routes to successful change and successful careers. So we're promoting inward investment. That's a key part of this as well. We have over £1 billion of inward investment under discussion on the table at this moment from various partners, which is incredibly impressive. Key priorities amongst all of that is attracting a university. That remains a key focus of the work we know we need to deliver. In terms of our partners, in terms of the partnership working, we have a very close and positive relationship with the Chamber of Commerce. That has become particularly important as local government reorganisation has come onto the horizon. Some of our relationships with our business community is going to be incredibly important in making the case for what that North Hampshire economy looks like. Our Federation of Small Businesses is another important partner. It's important to recognise the vast majority of the over 7,000 businesses in the borough are small businesses, and they are absolutely critical to the economy. We have some massive major employers that we obviously work very closely with, but it's that small business sector that really underpins the success of the economy, and that's really important. These are strong allies in our conversations with government. So the other part that we need to put into all of this is levering now as much government investment as we can get our hands on to deliver this agenda and to make sure that it works in the way we want it to across all the various facets of the strategy of the framework. Putting it simply, we can use the word growth. I often say growth is as a word is bandied around so much it's almost become meaningless. What it's really about is jobs, investment, skills and inclusion. If I could just put it into those 4 terms, I think that's the focus of this work, and that's what the team have come up with as the future economic framework for us to drive at. What sits beneath that are then all the other partnerships, all the other work that goes on in all the other strategies that this council has got to make that meaningful. But I thank the team. We have an amazing team, and I am really grateful to be working with them on this agenda.
Thank you, Paul. Daniel, as the lead officer, do you want to say anything?
My colleague Marie is going to just run through a very quick presentation just to highlight the key points of the framework and then open that for discussion and debate, really. You need to duplicate. And it should work. Nope.
Let's have a look.
Yes.
Great stuff. Good evening, councillors. So my name is Marie-Lise. I lead or manage the economic development and the place marketing teams, working closely with Daniel. And I'm pleased to just give you a quick overview of the future economic framework. So why do we need this? Obviously, so we had the economic growth strategy of 2018, but we've since had some major global events and therefore required a bit of a refreshed approach. Obviously, UK policy shifts impacting local economic strategies, and then we needed this to guide our future inclusive growth and adaptation. So how it was developed? As you would expect, it was developed through research, data analysis, that's stakeholder engagement. We brought it to this committee. It was the previous iteration of this committee as well, probably over a year ago, to seek that initial input and to guide us in sort of how to shape it, get those key themes. A thorough review of reports to assess our economic strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. Lots of quantitative analysis for that solid evidence base. Qualitative insights from our businesses, our partners and our council officers, and then engagement through conversations, workshops, briefings. So we've got 3 cross-cutting themes, and then we've got 3 pillars which we'll get onto, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. You've got the report and the full future economy framework, but just to sort of
that highlight these three themes of inclusive growth. So it's about fair opportunities for all of our communities to actively participate in this growth. It's about clean growth and embedding that sustainability in all initiatives to reduce the impact on the natural environment. And then smart growth, so integrating AI and emerging technologies to empower our businesses and workforce. So under the three pillars, so the first one is strengthening our businesses. So it's about growing our own, and that's about our startup communities and what we can do to provide those essential resources and strengthening that local ecosystem. And then keeping businesses in the borough, so support local businesses, addressing supply chain needs, simplifying support, and then enhancing that resilience, and this is regardless of location and sector. Strengthening communication channels, so enhancing engagement with businesses to ensure they feel supported and connected to us. Promote cross-sector collaboration, so encourage collaboration among businesses and community organisations to drive innovation and sustainable solutions. And so here we're talking not just about that private sector, we are talking about the whole of the landscape and this ecosystem around businesses and economy. Removing barriers to opportunity. So it's about helping people find work, helping them stay in work, and helping progress where they're at. So help people find work, so connect those job seekers with opportunities, improve their skills, help people stay in work. So we work with our partners to provide wraparound support and promote job longevity. And then help people progress in education and careers, so to provide skills and experience and enhance that career development. And then showcase and shape our place. So it's about how we tell our story, showcasing all of our strengths to attract investment and engage residents. So that's about inward investment, highlighting those unique key assets. It's about business engagement, connect businesses with resources for growth. It's about our visitor economy, so promoting tourism through targeted campaigns, resident engagement, promote what the borough has to offer to increase that local enjoyment, participation, pride in place. And then about enhancing our place, so support high street businesses, boost vibrancy and footfall, and expand our Love Basingstoke events programme, to further sort of foster that pride in place. So that's it in very, very short. And we welcome your questions and input and feedback.
Thank you, Marilise. Right, any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Golding.
I'm afraid I've got 2 post-it notes full. And some of them I don't want to come across as nitpicky. Some of them are just proofreading, so you're very welcome to my post-it notes afterwards, if you want to listen to me. On page 3, so I'm looking at the actual framework document. On page 3, the wording of the last bullet point really confused me. And then I got to page 10, because page 3 is the executive summary. I got to page 10, which is the full document, and you've expressed it beautifully. And succinctly, and I would just suggest you use the same wording in both places, to be honest. Actually, do you know what? I'll talk to you about some of them because they're really nitpicky. Back in the day when we used to work very closely together, Daniel, growing our own, like we were great at startups, but then kind of getting those startups to small, medium enterprise businesses was like our real blocker. And I didn't really see that in there. And I saw some of the stats in the appendix, which maybe we've solved it, maybe we haven't, but I'd really appreciate your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. I think, we are quite good at kind of supporting people to create companies, but I agree. I think, when it comes to the scale-up side of things, so I think in the action plan, we actually have a clearly identified action to work with the Scale-Up Institute to kind of devise a plan on how we can work with our local businesses to take them to the next stage. So it's something that we want to tackle through the action plan.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Building on Councillor Golding's point about the pipeline of startups to small businesses to large businesses, you know, that there is a national problem there, and there's something in the UK economy that we need to think about. But as much as we can do locally is important, and I welcome this refresh of our economic strategy. A lot of time has passed, a lot of things have changed, and you know, given the national tax environment, the impact that jobs tax is having from Westminster on growth, we do need to do a lot here locally. So I welcome this report coming forwards. On SMEs in particular, I was interested in the reference in the actions section to an SME grant coming forward. So I wondered if we could have slightly more information on that. And alongside that, maybe there's something about telling our residents quite how successful we are as a place, because I'm not sure that residents quite appreciate actually, you know, the GVA that we're generating, the number of startups that we're generating, the investment that's coming through. I think we're very good at telling external investors, but I'm not sure necessarily that we tell our own story to ourselves. And there's something there about building confidence in the community, in building confidence in people who maybe want to start a business of their own, that actually Basingstoke is a really successful place to do that.
So on the first question, the grant scheme, so we've been allocated a further year of UK Shared Prosperity Fund funding, and kind of looking at the amount of funding we've got in the pot, we've got about £300,000, which is not a huge amount for 1 year, but I think, you know, engaging with Cabinet, the decision was made to use that funding to support businesses, because in the previous round we had a big focus on community organisation and less so on businesses. So we are looking at a range of grant schemes, you know, carrying on with the Town and Village Centre Fund to support high streets, looking also at supporting rural businesses, and then sort of the small business grant basically is providing small investment. We haven't sort of finally agreed the exact amount of funding that will be available, potentially around £5,000 for small investments in companies. It'd be mostly capital, I would expect, rather than revenue. But I think, you know, when businesses come to us, they kind of let, you know, we could do with a bit of money to help us with upgrading this infrastructure or investing kind of that new equipment. So that's what we're looking at. On the good news stories, we do share sort of good news, but we tend to do this through our business channels because it's sometimes more relevant for businesses. I agree that we probably don't do enough with residents. But I think, you know, we're also conscious that we do a lot with residents, more on the sort of cultural and arts and events and, you know, sort of the enjoyment side of things. So it's something that we can look at as part of our kind of Love Basingstoke brand and messaging, because, you know, we do get kind of really high levels of engagement with the brand.
Any other questions? Julian?
Sorry. Yeah, from my ward, we're not seeing an awful lot focused towards the southwest of the borough. And I think in a previous piece of work, not quite this piece of work, you had the mass rapid transport system to get people out of that area, which completely disappeared, I think, now. But we also had a period when near Beggarwood there were going to be a significant number of small business startups. That became housing. We've now got the warehouse prospect at Junction 7, and also, again, probably looking too far ahead, but South Manydown, maybe more small businesses around that area associated possibly with the hospital, but that's a very long way away. But I just feel we haven't quite got the focus here on the southwest of the town, and I guess that could be exacerbated by the merge with Hart, and that will actually draw a lot of the economic activity to the east.
So I think, you know, the framework itself is not looking at the spatial side of things. So I think it's very much what I would call probably the softer side of economic development. So very much that business support, business engagement. So when we look at business support, we are not geographically focused. You know, we don't sort of handpick, you know, who we're going to support. Basically, we support whoever, you know, comes to us for support, and depending, I think, on the sector or the type of issues, you know, we then sort of, you know, try to support everyone. Obviously, you know, we can't support every single business in the borough because we have 7,000 or more than 7,000 businesses. So, so I think when we look at business support, we always look at what we call the proactive. So I think kind of targeting either sort of specific sectors or specific type of businesses or sizes, and then we look at the reactive. Basically, if a business comes to us for support, we would obviously absolutely help them. So I think from my perspective, it's probably more work to do on our part, but also I would say, on your part, to make sure that people know that the council has an economic development team and that people can come and talk to us, because, no matter how hard we try, we know we can't always reach absolutely every single business in the borough. So I think, if you can be our ambassadors, really, I think, and remind people that the council is here to support, when you kind of engage with businesses in your area, please kind of make them aware that we're here.
Junior? If I could come back on a completely different area, 5G. I see that we're focusing on that in Basingview. I also know that in my ward there have been quite a number of masts that have been refused. Are we satisfied that actually a coherent 5G strategy or rollout can be achieved in the borough and deliver for business?
So the 5G in Basingview is a very specific project. So it's not what we call a public network, it's a private network. So, and the focus is very much on supporting startups, innovation, and Councillor Gawley may remember when we started it together. We are getting there finally. In terms of the wider 5G infrastructure, this is completely out of our hands. This is completely guided through, by central government. So the strategy is basically delivered by central government working with the service provider. So there's really nothing we can do on, either broadband or 5G. That's completely out of our hands now, unfortunately.
Right, Councillor Tuck.
Thank you. I was really interested in the young people stuff that you were discussing. And I think there are a couple of things. There's the skills gap. So it's great for those for whom tertiary education is a thing and it works. That's marvellous. But I feel it's really important that there's a broad range of whether it's called an apprenticeship scheme or any other kind of training. I don't mind how it works or how it fits in. And I think a broad range of competencies and different mechanisms to attract and draw young people in is really key. And I was trying to tie it in with your action plan of the different things. I think I'd really encourage you to put time and effort into that. I think it's absolutely key. I was really concerned to see that you'd identified in your skills gap that young people lack the soft skills, personal and interpersonal abilities like communication, teamwork, problem solving, adaptability and professionalism to enable effective interaction and collaboration at work. And I'd really like us to look at encouraging. It's the kind of thing that just says to me, cadets, scouting, venture scouts, all these things that I think have been, I feel slightly pushed to one side. And I would love us to support those kind of organisations in terms of encouraging some of these young people that maybe kind of finished their bit of formal education, a bit stuck in what they do next. But there are young persons ones which are not, yay high children, but for young adults. And also I would really encourage to develop and evolve those skills. Young persons volunteering. I mean, whether that happens to be in my pet subject, natural environment, or any other area, I actually think if you're out of work and not able currently this week, this month, to engage in other forms of education or training of whatever kind, then get out there, volunteer, do something, because you will gain skills, you will gain confidence, and the networking will be amazing.
Actually, there's a cohort of young people who obviously are not in work and therefore we need to support them into work. That's a reality. However, in Basingstoke, it is more often the case that young people are actually going into jobs because of the nature of our market. And the context of that then becomes really important in terms of skills development and career development, because it's easy to get a job in Basingstoke is different to I have a career and I'm looking to move into a different part of my life in that regard. So helping younger people in that environment becomes important when they are also a key part of the household income. And that's important. Younger people have become a more critical part of the household income, because they're still living at home, all because of the cost of living crisis and the reality that people have faced in recent years. So that challenge becomes really important, and therefore younger people having their own life chance, their own direction they can take their life in through skills development, career development, the opportunities becomes really important. You're right, the tertiary sector in terms of our colleges is hugely successful. We've got two of the most successful colleges in Hampshire are in Basingstoke. And that's great. We've got more that will join us when we become North Hampshire. That's a great story to tell. The interesting point becomes for those young people who don't go to college, who take that job route, who may have skills they've gained at school and qualifications they've gained at school, but then come back in later life. And I see this in teaching with the OU, particularly at foundation level, where you see, and particularly younger women, coming back into desiring to get a qualification in order to move on with their career because they didn't do it at school or they left school too early. So for that combination of factors becomes really important. The institutions we can bring on board, and again this is perhaps where a university working with our colleges and the school providing that through life learning experience becomes quite exciting actually of what we could achieve and begin to do.
Councillor Golding.
Thank you. I was actually also a bit concerned about the statement that Councillor Tuck read out, but mainly because we said it about all young people in Basingstoke, and that felt rather damning of our younger generation, actually. And I think, yes, there clearly are challenges, but to say that all of them, it just felt a bit mean. Anyway, we've been talking about the removing barriers to opportunity section, and I really welcome seeing that in there. But what did concern me was kind of the woolliness of our actions. In all the other sections, it's like, we will deliver this, we are going to do this, we have like ownership of it. And in this one, it's like initiatives focus or programs aim to, or various programs. There's no like commitment, and I appreciate it's going to be the one where we're going to work most with partners. But then we can say that and we can own that. It can be commission this. We're going to. I felt it needed to be a lot more stronger and a lot more committed in its language, because the passion's clearly there, the need's clearly there. So we should own it.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. We do actually have a skills plan that sits underneath that, but we didn't want to put everything in the action plan because it's actually rather long. But I think, absolutely, this is kind of probably the one area, because, when you look at council responsibilities, actually skills and education are not our responsibility at all. So that's why we need to work with our partnership, and I think we've got a very strong partnership, the Basingstoke Employment and Skills Partnership, which bring together all the people that support people into employment, and together, we are devising kind of, a range of actions that we're taking. One thing that we kind of, the council will be leading on is applying to DWP to set up a youth hub. So the youth hub is very much about providing that resource for young people that are either claiming or not in employment, education or training, working with our partners to support that wraparound support, either to get them into a job, into training. So, hopefully we'll be getting the funding for DWP and kickstart things in September.
Right, I've decided it's my turn now. This is a new action plan, and we're a small team with a relatively small budget. Looking at the action plan, there are about 50 actions there, which sort of could run the risk of being spreading you too thinly. If we're in sort of KPI mode still, what difference would you hope to achieve in the next year to 2 years that as a result of this new plan? Because as a council, it's more our ability to work with partners and convene, isn't it, rather than because we've got lots of money to spend.
So I think, there's a range of things, but if we kind of look at the supporting our businesses, the first one thing actually I'm very keen to do is actually simplify that business support journey. And that's why we want to actually set up a business support forum, working with the all organizations that provide business support. Because if you're a small business and you're trying to understand, where can I go to get support, it's really complicated. So I think, by bringing together all the organisations that work locally, that provide business support, but getting them to coordinate better and collaborate better, we should be able to simplify and provide a lot clearer information to businesses for support. Also, we want to commission some business support, ourselves. Have an organisation that will focus on people that want to start a business, because there is a gap at the moment. There is there's a lot of online stuff. If you want to start your business, there's thousands of websites. But actually being able to talk to someone, to start a business, that's not really there. So I think that's kind of one thing we'd like to to achieve as well. Looking at the skills, I think our priority would be the youth hub. Be able to set the youth hub and start supporting young people, I think, on their way back to work into education and training. And I think, around the shaping our place, I think, for us, it's really kind of carrying to strengthen that Love Basingstoke brand and seeing our kind of engagements kind of carrying going up, more people coming to our events. If we look at our events program this year, I think, Let's Grow, we had 15,000 people over 3 nights. Last year we had 12,000, so already, we had 10,000. So 5,000 more people coming to one single event. So kind of carrying doing that and supporting our town centre vibrancy, because those events, and Let's Go is a prime example, had a significant impact on the nighttime economy. All the restaurants, all the bars were absolutely full that night.
Thank you. Good answer. Thank you very much. In my humble opinion. Right. Any other questions? Councillor Carr.
One of the more interesting ways to measure how an economy is thriving is to look at sort of growth, GDP, and as in the appendix, gross value added per capita. One of the issues in our economy nationally is actually, our GDP per capita is not growing nearly as it should be. So it's pleasing to see in the appendix that Basingstoke and Deane is sitting in terms of GVA per hour higher than the South East, higher than the UK nationally. But I do think there's something about how do you grow that GVA per capita? How do you ensure that the hours worked by people in Basingstoke and Deane, and eventually North Hampshire, if we can get it, how we get that up, how we get that per capita hour figure higher? And I think part of that is thinking about the smart growth element of this plan. It's about thinking, what are the industries, what are the sectors that are going to deliver those higher paying, higher skilled jobs that, as corollary, raise standards of life, that people are able to live here. And I think one of the issues I had with the plan as it's currently set out is, as Councillor Isaac has mentioned, it is very, very broad, and there is something about perhaps needing to choose what our priorities are as a sort of a local industrial area. What are the areas that we really want? What are the sectors in our economy here that we really want to grow and thrive? And how are we going to focus our resources? How are we going to focus our marketing on those? And part of that is encouraging the kinds of businesses that we want to invest. Obviously, business investment in general is great. Businesses coming in is great, but what are those smart growth businesses that we want? And if you can make that decision, then you can start to build the sort of innovation ecosystem that you need for a successful economy. So if you look at the Greater Cambridge example, there's a really, really successful team of people around Innovate Cambridge who work with the university, well, both of them, and the industries in the area. And that's because they've got a clear sector focus. They're thinking about life sciences, they're thinking about data, they're thinking about pharmaceuticals. If I were to look at this document, I would say, I'm not sure what the priority areas are. And I think we need to have a view on that if we're going to build the ecosystem that can raise our per capita overall. So I welcome this effort. I think there's something about priority and prioritising the places, the sectors that will raise the standards of living for our people the most.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah. No, thank you, Councillor Luke. No, I do agree. I take your point. I think interestingly, we have done some some work on our key sectors and looking at kind of the growth sectors. when we went back to businesses to understand, would you welcome a sector-focused approach? The answer was no. They were actually telling us, what we need is a diverse supply chain, because we can't grow our sector if we haven't got, the other sectors around us to actually grow our supply chain. So I think it was quite interesting. That's why I think, we moved away a little bit from really focusing on that sector. I mean, it doesn't mean that we're not going to carry on looking at sectors, don't get me wrong, but we've moved away from that priority, literally based on business feedback that told us, what actually will support our growth is to have a really strong and diverse supply chain.
I was just going to say, I think one of the reasons why the economy's managed to sustain itself through a number of turbulent years is because of the sectors that we actually have. In terms of our manufacturing sector, it's quite a significant sector of the economy. So actually, the breadth of the economy we have in Basingstoke has always been its greatest strength. So maintaining that is a real focus. I like, in terms of the direction of travel, I like the point about science and R&D and STEM. Because actually, in terms of the skills agenda, that fits perfectly with growing that. In the 80s, we were the tech place. We look at Basingview and look at the businesses that were on that site, the Motorola, all those people that came to Basingstoke in that context. Me and colleagues share the view, and I'm sure you do too, that with the AI revolution, Basingstoke is perfectly placed. Again, a lot of it comes down to location, but we are perfectly placed in the context of our looking up the M3, not down the M3, to really take hold of that sector. And that's an interesting growth area, potentially, of the future around AI and what we do around that future technology. And it's not going to be easy to attract them. But my goodness me, if we were able to, that kind of generation that you're talking about is great. The other bit just to think about is our relationship to the public sector. And I think in terms of the hospital, in terms of the other sectors, I think the relationship of the economy to support them. So the life sciences bit, Cambridge is like Oxford, it's very particular in terms of its life sciences by the very nature of those two economies. We have some amazing businesses locally. I mean, Blatchford's is one to immediately point to in terms of prosthetics. The fact that many of the prosthetics you would have seen in the Olympics, the Paralympics, were designed. It's here in Basingstoke that happens, and to celebrate that, to showcase that, becomes really important because it tells a story about the kinds of businesses we have in Basingstoke and how successful they are. And so we do that. And at the recent business event we held, the recent business conference, we packed out the Haymarket, not only with local businesses telling their story back, but also businesses wanting to invest. And that's quite an important story, I think, to show our residents, as you rightly said, the business community might be our biggest allies in that, actually.
Councillor Carr.
Final and separate point. Would it be possible to get a bit of an update on the university point? And I think it would be useful to get a sense whether the aspiration is a campus of another university, and whether within that there's a view on the kind of campus that we're thinking about. Are we thinking about going for a sort of a sector focus on that? Again, does it fit within that science and technology area, or are we what is our aim fundamentally? And then finally, just to say, how are we going to move from this to integrate our thinking on the economic geography as it relates to LGR? How are we going to? Because I did feel that obviously this is very borough centric, but there is something important now about all the work we produce needs to link in to that vision that we have for a North Hampshire authority. And I did feel that we haven't quite demonstrated our thinking on that in this document.
So on the document itself, what we decided to do is to use that as the guiding principles to give us the flexibility to react and to respond. We already work very closely with Rushmore and Hart on economic development matters. As a matter of fact, we're planning on a way day together later on this year. And I think we have compared our sort of strategies, and I think we find that there's a lot of synergies already. So I think I don't think it's going to be a big jump for us or a big leap basically to bring the three areas together on our approach to economic development. We're already quite closely aligned.
Julian.
just coming.
Yes, sorry, yes, oh, how silly of me, yes, yeah. No, can't let that one go by, can we?
Go. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Go.
No. Let's go back to the question. I'm not going to let that one go by without saying something. Yeah, I mean, it is a key part of the strategy, it's a key part of what we want to achieve. The discussions are incredibly positive, and I think, to give you reassurance, I think what we've proven is that there is a clear HE market in North Hampshire to be tapped. I think the focus around STEM, and in particular around what we've just said, future technology, becomes an important part of that conversation. There will also need to be a conversation around subject areas that create an income stream to what comes. That's important. That might be more standard business orientated degrees, but that's to be discussed, to be decided. I think it's also that straightforward degrees, and not only just the university, but in terms of talking about that third tertiary sector, is also suggesting apprenticeship degrees become an important part of this conversation. And in conversation with others beyond the university, there is a strong desire to expand that opportunity for apprenticeship degrees and how that might be done. So there's a number of providers that could come into this equation, and how they combine, how they knit together is really important in this. Suffice to say, at the moment, I think the discussions are incredibly positive. I'm not going to go beyond there because I don't want to tempt fate beyond what we should say. But suffice to say, it is as strong as it's ever been. And so I'm hopeful in the next year we will definitely have some progress to report on.
Thank you, Julian.
Yeah. As, I guess, a graduate of the University of Surrey and someone who actually built the University of Surrey in my backs, I returned, and a donor to them still. I returned there 2 weeks ago, and the university, compared with the campus that I worked on when I built it, is now probably 10 times bigger. And I think we really have to understand what our ambitions are in terms of the site we choose. It may be that we don't become a standalone university and expand to that extent, but we really do have to have room for expansion and indeed some social activities for the students.
I completely agree, because you imagine what a student population could do for the income generation in that top of town, in that town centre. I mean, all of those equations are part of the enticement that says, yeah, just what a difference it could make. I would also just say I need to declare an interest, obviously, as a lecturer for the Open University. I mean, I do teach in the sector, so from that perspective, you know, there are other models of delivering higher education than a campus, and they are important too. So the online route is also used very effectively, and there's many students I've taught in Basingstoke accordingly. I just think at the moment that there's a coming together of a number of these things. It's a bit what John was saying about the number of action points. A number of these things are knitting together really well for the opportunity we have. You add Farnborough to this equation, you add Aldershot to the equation, you add what Hart had too, because that's important in terms of the rural economy, which is something we haven't really focused on tonight, but it's a key part of the agenda. Then actually we have something very, very powerful and very, very special, and it is not Hampshire. This is North Hampshire. It is very important, the difference that is in this equation. So I take the message and agree with you.
No. Okay, very strong plug there for North Hampshire. So are we done on?
One more. Just the tourist economy. I don't think we have a very clear. I don't know whether we're talking about the whatever it is, the Great Wolf Resort, but I see that more as a retail opportunity than a tourist opportunity. I think we have to be very sensitive to our Jane Austen heritage, as I say, plonking a great warehouse development in the middle of Jane Austen country doesn't seem to have been a very sensible thing for our tourist industry, and it also impacts things like the Wayfarer's Walk, which also goes practically through the site. So I think we're going to have to work very hard to have a sensible offering for tourism.
I think it's interesting because we actually have a strong offering for tourism. We actually have a good range of attractions locally. If you look around the borough, and I'm not just talking about the town of Basingstoke, very much looking at the whole borough. And I think, at the moment
we've mentioned Highclere here.
Absolutely, Highclere Castle and Bombay Sapphire, and and the Vine, and obviously this year is 250 years of the birth of Jane Austen. I think we're doing some work around campaigning and kind of showcasing. And I think I have to say comment, for example, some people in Overton, that kind of really sort of put Overton on the map, around Jane Austen by creating some walking trails. We support them with funding. So we've seen that kind of the community kind of rallying around the Jane Austen element. But Jane Austen is only one part of our tourism offer, and I think we want to bring together all our sort of visitor partners, so attractions, but also hospitality, to understand how together we can actually amplify that message, especially in the context, where Hampshire County Council is kind of pulling their resources from tourism, for example, so they won't be have a Hampshire website anymore. But we're working on sort of with the wider Hampshire partners around sort of the local visitor economy partnership as well. So we are doing some work, but we also need to be conscious that I think where we are, we will never compete with the New Forest or Winchester in terms being key attractions, but we can do more in terms of showcasing what we have to attract visitors to the borough.
Right, thank you, Daniel. Right, I think since we've reached the end of this now, the recommendation to the committee was that, about the overall approach to supporting economic development in the borough of the new plan and the priorities for economic development as outlined in the future economy framework. I think my sense is we've given you a sort of a general endorsement and encouragement. Hope some of the comments that you've received tonight will give you pause for thought. So good luck with it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Right. Now, the next item on the agenda is the recommendation tracker. I think it's sort of speaks for itself. There has been follow-up by officers of questions and recommendations from the committee, so I don't think there's anything we need to say on that unless anyone disagrees with me. And then the final item is a review of work programme. Of course, we've got no more of these of this presently constituted committee meetings this side of May, so some of us may be sitting on this committee after May. Who knows? We'll find out in due course. But we have a committee date in June, and there are no items currently scheduled. There is a proposal we agreed last time we met to look at progress in relation to diversity, equality, and inclusion. And is that something that could be done in that timetable, Katie?
Yes, we can accommodate that.
So that's one item potentially for the June committee. And then we also wanted to play an active part in monitoring the developments in relation to local government reorganisation as a committee, and so that's something that's listed for the future. I think we also had a proposal in relation to the relationship with the armed forces. Was that right?
Yes, the Armed Forces Covenant.
So, is that something that could be looked at in June? Yeah, okay. Are we all happy with that? Any other ideas? Councillor Jones. I think that you're on the wrong committee, unfortunately. I think that's E and I. I'm advised. Well, I think there's proposed meeting with yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I think at the start of the next municipal year, we'll have another chairs meeting with all the chairs of overview and scrutiny. So if anyone has any ideas for topics, if they could fill out a topic suggestion form, we can go through them and decide what's the most appropriate committee for those items.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Right. I think that brings us to an end, and thank you everyone for your attendance and your contributions.